Welcome, welcome, welcome. Céad Míle Fáilte to the Living Well with and Beyond Cancer Conference 2021. We're back here again for our second time in a virtual way, but hey, we got a whole lot going on here. We have workshops, incredible speakers, exhibitors, and we want you to enjoy this conference as much as you would if it was an in-person conference. We want you to connect with us, engage with us, and we believe that we've got a lot to offer to you. Now we know that over the last year, COVID still plays a shadow in our lives in terms of isolation, cocooning, vaccines, vulnerability. It throws up a lot of vulnerability for us. And we know also that the Irish Cancer Society is here to support you in the context of cancer or COVID-related issues. And the free phone number there is 1-800-200-700. Cancer.ie is the website, and the support staff are here right throughout the conference. Okay, we want to know where you're coming from. Where are you virtually located? You have a chat function there. Put it into the chat function. We want to see where you're come from. We want to see there are people coming in from abroad as well. So put in your county and your town, and we'd love to know where you're coming from, because this is all about connecting with each other, and we want to connect with you, and we do this through the chat function. So let us know where you're coming from. I'm going to explain a little bit about the whole how this works. So in our reception button, you have a platformer video that explains everything about this platform. So if you're confused at any time or you want more information, click on that reception, and then you can play that video and it'll explain everything. And within that, there's technical support. You can put in the chat function if you need some technical support, and we'll provide that technical support through the chat function. So there's help here right throughout the whole conference, so there is. And our schedule is up there. You can see what's on at any given time. And here we are now, we're on the main stage. So lots of things are going to happen on the main stage. And our workshops, which start at 11:30, 12:30 and 2 p.m. every day. There's 7 different workshops, incredible stuff. They happen in our sessions stage. So on the main stage, this is where things are happening with the main speakers, and then the breakouts happen in our session stage. So remember, technical support is here to help you, and this is all being recorded. A link will be sent to you, and you'll be able to catch up and stuff if you missed it as well. So without further ado, I'm going to call upon Averil Power, the Chief Executive Officer of the Irish Cancer Society, to formally open this conference.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for the latest edition of an event which by now has a very special place in the Irish Cancer Society calendar. All of us have had to do without a lot over the last 15 months, so it's great that we can still gather, albeit virtually, for what is always a very positive and uplifting experience. Our Living Well events have probably been needed more than ever this year and last. Living with and beyond cancer is difficult at the best of times, but has been particularly hard during the pandemic. But events like this remind us that while we may be apart, we are not alone. Over the next 2 days, we'll hear some great advice and tips on everything from self-care and coping to practical support on issues like returning to work, benefits and entitlements, and discussing cancer with children. We'll have exercise and mindfulness demonstrations. We'll look at the possible effects of cancer and treatment, and hear some recommendations on how to resume sexual life post-diagnosis and treatment. We'll hear from patients like Louise Collins on what it's like to receive a diagnosis and care in the middle of a pandemic and the challenges this has presented. We'll also hear about a new course, Life and Cancer, Enhancing Survivorship, that the Irish Cancer Society has developed in partnership with the HSE's National Cancer Control Programme to be delivered through our daffodil centres. We'll hear more about the fantastic cancer research taking place in Ireland and the importance of patient participation in research. There'll also be lots of other expert talks and interactive workshops aiming to address common issues that many survivors face during and after their cancer journey. We really hope that you come away from these talks with helpful, practical advice that can make a difference to your life. As part of this shared experience, we also want to hear from you. So please do use the chat function to share your thoughts today and tomorrow. Also, please remember that the Irish Cancer Society is here for you to help in any way that we can, today, tomorrow, and every day. The specialist cancer nurses on our free phone support line and in our daffodil centres are here to listen and provide you with advice, information, and support on any aspect of cancer. The counsellors working on our virtual counselling service and in local cancer support centres around the country can help you and your loved ones cope with the emotional impact of cancer. And our volunteer drivers can bring you to and from your chemotherapy appointments, so you have one less thing to worry about. We have incredible volunteers and staff at the Irish Cancer Society, all of whom have been affected by cancer, and all of whom are determined to do everything that we can to save lives and improve the lives of children and adults with cancer in Ireland. So please enjoy the next 2 days, and please reach out to us at any stage if we can help you in any way. For now, I'll leave you back in the hands of our very capable host, Dr. Eddie Murphy, who will kick off the rest of the day's proceedings. Thank you, Eddie, for being part of this unique event for the second year in a row.
Hi, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Michael Nowlan. Thanks very much, Michael, for coming on board with us. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Michael, that in 2011, Michael was diagnosed with lymphoma and colon cancer, and he had surgery, chemotherapy, and maintenance treatment. And in addition, in 2016, Michael became a peer support volunteer with the Society's survivorship program. Incredible work that you're doing, Michael. But let's just go back. Your life changed in 2011. Maybe you could bring us back there a little bit.
Well, I had been sick probably for about 6 months before. I'd done some voluntary work in Africa, and I came back and I was sick for 6 months. So eventually the diagnosis came in early May that I had lymphoma. And then a couple of weeks later, in a different hospital, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. So a bit of a double whammy. But in a way satisfying, because they were real solutions to an illness that I'd had for 6 months.
Okay. So I'd imagine then, with your life thrown in like that, and we're talking about the whole area of support today, where did you find support? I'd be interested in hearing about that, Michael.
Yeah, initially, I can remember reading the nurse line, the Cancer Society's nurse line on the back of a bus, the number. That's where I found the number of the helpline. So my immediate reaction on the first diagnosis was to ring them and look for the booklets. The booklets are a great source of real valid information. So, and then I can remember, just before my surgery for my colon cancer, I had to ring them again and say, can you please send me the booklets on colon cancer? And of course they did. So the other place that I got support was from ARC in South Circular Road. I used them, and we got counselling and support from them. And of course, family were another great support.
So it's unusual enough that men reach out. Maybe you found that in your work as a peer support. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's in any of the things that I've done in supporting people and supporting peers, or I'm also involved in a survivorship program, and there are so few men. You know, it is 10%. Men just don't look for help, which is very sad, but they don't.
And as two men here, we gotta thank our sisters, wives, mothers, all the rest of it. But we also got to learn from them as well, in how women are just incredible at gathering support, and we've got a lot to learn from them.
I totally agree with that, yes. And I know I was sent to the ARC by my sister, so that was the start of a long volunteering process. Yeah.
You're now a peer support volunteer. Tell me a little bit about that work. And
Yeah, well, again, we'll have to go back to the end of my first round of chemotherapy, which ended just before Christmas in 2011. And on my last day, a nurse said to me, "There's a person around the corner who's starting chemotherapy today. Would you like to tell him what it's really like?" And I got such a kick out of that I was able to pass on the hard-won information that I'd got over the 6 months of treatment, that I felt this is a good thing to do. And I reached out to the Cancer Society only to be told you have to wait until you're after treatment. So after treatment and maintenance treatment, I again went back to the Cancer Society and says, "Here I am, would you like me?" And I was accepted and trained and have been taking calls since 2016.
Wow.
But it all went back to that time in the hospital.
And I like that. I like that notion that you described about, in a way, hard-won information. I like that notion. And tell me, what sort of questions are people asking you now in your role as peer supporter?
Yes, a lot of people get terrific medical advice in the hospital, but living with the side effects, living with maybe illness or fatigue is a major problem that there's relatively little information about. And a lot of the people would ring the nurse line and we'd talk to them about just how life goes on, how you cope with waking up at 4 a.m. And after that, people really get a kick when I say to them, look, 10 years ago, I had it. And here I am now able to carry on just as normal. Nobody would know by looking at me that I had 2 cancers and had sort of 3 years treatment. So people want to know how they regain their fitness, how they handle ongoing side effects, and what is life like, and how will I get back to some sort of normality.
And there's something very powerful in this peer support. Somebody that has walked the space, delivering the information and sharing that information.
Yes.
It can be incredibly powerful.
And I think that has got across to at least some of the people that I've spoken to on the phone. They've gone away seemingly happy. I hope happy, and I hope feeling, that they're just going to take hold of their life and get back to a normal life.
I think one of the areas around the management of the whole area of chronic fatigue, it's often not discussed. I see it in my own house. My wife is a cancer in survivorship, and chronic fatigue plays a massive role in this area.
Totally, and it can be long term. I certainly do not do things in the evening, and I just manage my life around that. That's fine. You can largely do it, but it is continuous, or it can be continuous, and you need to learn to manage it. And I have been taught by various support organizations and helped on how to manage it.
And I'm no doubt when you pass on what your golden nuggets and your tips on pacing and understanding your body needs and listening to your body, I've no doubt it's incredibly powerful when it comes from you, Michael.
Yeah. Well, I always talk about these baby steps, that I have a long-term goal to climb the highest mountain, but I have to get up little hills first. And that's how I organized my recovery. I had a series of aims on different mountains to get up, and I did them gradually.
And tell me, you bring humor to this as well. That humor plays an important role, doesn't it?
Of course, humor is very important in all of life, and especially in the cancer survivor area. People get a great sense out of humor, and cancer survivors can make jokes about things that other people would think are kind of weird.
Yeah, well, it's sort of a dark humor, isn't it, really? And
it's a dark humor, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you see that in healthcare as well, but I think you'd often see that in cancer survivors. Um, Today at 1:30, you're leading a small group discussion. Maybe you can tell us what people can expect.
Okay, we're trying to simulate a lunch table with up to 15 people around it, hopefully with their microphones and cameras on. And we'll just have a chat together as cancer survivors about the issues that are facing people today, and maybe how our survivors can help survivors. And we're doing this. There's several peer supporters are doing this today, and we're also doing it tomorrow at 1:30 as well. So please join us at 1:30.
So it's a big call to action. Today at 1:30, you can join Michael Nowlan and all his other colleagues. And thank you so much, Michael, for doing this and for your great work in peer support.
Thank you.
Hi again, and before I welcome our next guest, I want to thank you all for joining us. The west coast of Ireland is very well represented. We have Lisa from Sligo, Helen from Galway, Gerard and Ruth from Cork, Barbara from Clare, and I know there's more of you out there in different areas of the country, so I'll pop them in there. And a big hello to, we've somebody from, Terry from Beijing. Imagine Beijing, so living well with cancer is stretching from Ireland to the shores of China. Imagine that with Terry in Beijing. So incredible. We want a lot of connectivity. Remember, the chat function is there, the webinar, our breakout sessions and workshops. We want you to really enjoy this experience over the next 2 days, where you gather information, where you gather support. But one of the things we're aware of too from last year's conference is you asked for more areas around self-care, and that's what this section is going to be. But before we go into that, I have a live poll for you. It's a poll, and we're really interested in looking at the level of stress that you've experienced over the last 15 months since COVID-19. So the level of stress and what level? So we have a very high, medium, minimal, or not at all. And we're going to ask you to pop in your answer to our live poll there in terms of the level of stress that you've experienced over the last 15 months or so since this pandemic hit our shores. And we'll give you the results in 30 minutes time. Because COVID-19 has created a lot of uncertainty and certain change and created vulnerability for us. And because of that, we're bringing in an incredible expert, Dr. Vicky Cooper. Vicky works in Beaumont Hospital in St. Luke's Oncology Centre there. And we'll bring in Vicky now. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, good morning, Eddie.
Good to speak to you, and thank you for all your work. Maybe just tell us a little bit about where you're working and what you do, and then we go into the presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Eddie. And just to say thank you very much to the Irish Cancer Society and all your sponsors for having me here this morning. And it's great to have a recognition of our self-care strategies. Vicky Cooper is my name. You may also know me as Vicky Lunt. I managed to get married in the middle of the global pandemic, so I have an alter ego that I'm still getting used to, Dr. Vicky Cooper. And I work in the St. Luke's Radiation Oncology Service in Beaumont Hospital. And I'm lucky enough to work with people and their family members when they attend for their cancer treatment and beyond that. And just to say well done to Mick Nowlan, who is a colleague of mine, and we present together in a peer support group. So well done for that presentation, Mick, really fantastic. So I might get going then on the presentation. So just to say, Jerry, that's the wrong presentation. That's actually the one for the workshop, which is just after this. You should have another presentation for me there, Jerry. So just to let you know, presenting this morning on the main stage, but also just to invite you all. I'm running two more practical sessions. So one straight after this morning, and then another one tomorrow. So this main stage presentation is going to be more the background, the research, the kind of information we have about self-care, and then the workshops, they're going to be more practical. So hopefully that'll work well for everybody. So we'll just see if the fantastic Jerry has got the presentation there for me. Any luck, Jerry? COVID-19 has certainly been a very steep learning curve in terms of all the technicalities. And I'm coming to you live from what we like to call the boffice in our house, which is the bedroom office. So I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. And I'm sure you're sitting around kitchen tables and at your offices at home and trying to figure things out for yourselves. So please bear with us. And I'm sure you have a lot of sympathy for our technical glitches this morning.
Well, Vicky, we're going to bring you back, and we maybe have a little bit of a conversation, and that'd be good, because I suppose that as two psychologists, we know the importance of self-care, and I'm going to maybe ask you to recall some of your sort of slides, as it were, in your head, and we can talk through some of that presentation. That would be great.
No problem at all, Eddie. I might open it on my side, and Eddie, if you stop me as I go along, and I'll kind of go as much as I can. And Eddie, if you need to stop me, please do that, because I can hear you nice and loud and clear.
Okay, and then we can maybe we'll talk through it a little bit, go back and forward. Off you go. So
perfect. That'd be great. So Eddie, I suppose, as you said, we're two psychologists, and often you and I are having conversations with people around self-care. And I suppose, especially during the global pandemic, it has been an emphasis. People have been told, look after your mental health. We need to self-care. We need to look after ourselves. But sometimes we don't really know what that actually looks like. And my hope today is to give a little bit of information about that, Eddie. So what I'm hoping to chat to people about today is really understanding that there's a certain level of stress which is necessary. So I think sometimes we have this idea, or this kind of, I suppose, hope that we can manage our stress to the point where we don't notice it. But actually, at Eddie, as you know, we need a certain level of stress, and the function of anxiety actually is to motivate us. So we do need a little bit of anxiety. I know certainly the last couple of minutes, Eddie, my heart has been racing, feeling the stress levels, feeling the stomach churning with the anxiety. But hopefully that's going to motivate me. This talk will benefit as a result of that, Eddie.
That's very interesting. And we know, yes, of course, that we talk about the whole area of stress as in EU stress, like not the European Union now, but we call it EU stress is the positive side of stress. And then distress. Absolutely. And the whole area of distress and managing distress. Because distress, in a way, is that aspect of our life that is that it can become overwhelming, but dealt with good self-care strategies, it can be managed in a way. So what we have, Vicky, you'll be glad to know we've got your slides up, and we're going to put you back in
Eddie.
Front and center. Slides, everybody. And Vicky, you're good to go with your slides. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks very much. Thanks, folks. So there you go. We'll imagine that the last minute and a half did not happen, and we'll start from the beginning. The question, and as I said to Eddie there, often people would say to me, I want to look after my self-care, but sometimes we think to ourselves, well, am I the only one responsible for self-care? So that is an actual picture of me in the mornings before coffee. And I don't know if anyone knows this guy. This is my boss. This is Professor Niall Pender. Is Niall responsible for my self-care? I mean, he's my boss. Surely he would have some responsibility to do with my kind of mental well-being and sort of my stress levels and self-care. What about this guy? Someone quite familiar to us all, certainly someone we see on the telly very often these days. Paul Reed, head of the HSC. Is he responsible for my self-care as a psychologist working in the healthcare system? What about this guy, the big boss, Stephen Donnelly, our Minister for Health? Surely he has a role in looking after my self-care and offering me strategies. Well, unfortunately, as the title says, self-care, we really are all responsible for our own self-care. And I love this little cartoon, and I think it really encapsulates what a lot of us often think. It's a lot easier to be caring for other people, to be fixing other people, and often we think that's the right thing to do. And unfortunately, it's to the detriment of our own self-help or our own self-care, and really, really important that we balance those things. So what are the barriers to self-care? A number of things. And I wonder as I go through these, those of you at home, in your offices, wherever you're accessing Beijing to the west of Ireland, just to identify perhaps where your barriers are, perhaps now or at a time when things have been difficult. So what about the carer mindset? So just like my little cartoon, we might think to ourselves, it's more important to support others. I'll be okay. I need to look after everybody else. The superhero mindset. This is something I've noticed a lot in my colleagues in healthcare and those in the helping profession. This idea that I should be able to cope, that somehow there's something wrong with me, and that this idea of me as a superhero, someone who can cope with everything, is somehow standing in the way of me self-caring. We certainly have time and competing priorities. We might be saying to ourselves, I don't have time to self-care. I'm too busy. Or a classic one, oh, I'll do X, Y, and Z first, and then I'll get to the self-care. We may also wonder about our perceived value, both of ourselves and of self-care. I might be saying to myself, I'm not worth it. I'm not worth self-caring. I don't value myself or prioritize myself enough to self-care. Or I might not value self-care and I might think, well, you know what, self-care is all a big waste of time. And human beings are habitual characters. We like to be in our structure with our routine. And sometimes the barrier is simply that it's not in my routine. It's not something I've been doing every day. And it's difficult to change habits. We only need to try and take up a new exercise regime, give up smoking, try and change our healthcare behaviors to realize that it's very, very difficult to change old habits. There may be a culture in our workplace or our family. We might be saying things like, in our company, we just get on with things. Or, in our family, or the Cooper family, we just get on with things. We don't bother with self-care. And then I think an important one, it's just not seen. We have a lack of models and supports for self-care. And so I'm delighted that Irish Cancer Society, after your feedback from last year, has really emphasized the importance of figuring out how do we model the importance of self-care, and certainly a huge theme this year. So where do we start? What do we do? Or we might be saying to ourselves, I can't do this alone. And that's what today this main stage speech is about, and then hopefully when I see you in the workshops as well. So there's me. I've introduced myself a little bit. A South African originally, proudly South African rugby supporter, but also a Mayo football supporter. So it's kind of the ups and the downs of being a sports fan there. And I suppose I really want you to understand that we're not trying to eliminate stress from our lives. Eddie spoke about eustress and distress. We're really trying to harness that good bit of stress to motivate us. But I want you to think about, what do you find stressful and why do you find it stressful? I'm going to tell you a little bit about what actually self-care is, because we talk about it as if we all know what it is. And then a concept that I really, really like, bounce back or resilience, and how that links to self-care, and how we build that through our self-care strategies. I'm going to introduce you to a self-care and peer support model. The lovely Nowlan, who spoke ahead of me there, one of the peer supporters. So I really think please please do join Mick and the other peer supporters. And this will speak to that importance of self-care, but also peer support care. And then I'll give you some self-care ideas as well. So as we were saying earlier, a certain level of stress is normal, it's understandable, and it's unavoidable. I might use the concept of anxiety or stress or fear or worry or concern. Just think of that as one concept today. We need a level of worry, a level of anxiety, a level of concern. And as I said earlier, the function of anxiety is to motivate us. So certainly feel very motivated after the rocky start this morning. So we know that evolution left us with a fight, flight, or freeze response. So back in the day when we were running away from bears and we had to hunt our lunch, we needed these ways of managing stress or threat. So I might flee, so that's flight. I might run away from the bear when it's coming after me. I might stay and fight it, or I might find myself frozen to try and cope with the situation. And unfortunately, we haven't evolved much further in terms of our stress and threat response. But what has changed is our environment. And I know there'll be a lot more said about COVID and the year that we've had. But just thinking about that, as well as just our modern life, which has frequent and prolonged stress, really important to know that we still have these stress responses: fight, flight, or freeze. This has physical, cognitive, emotional, and psychological consequences. You might find yourself, physically, your heart rate going up, your breathing impacted, feeling muscular tension. Emotionally, you might find yourself more fearful, more low in yourself in terms of your mood. Cognitively, we might find our thinking to be fuzzy, difficult to make decisions, for example. And then psychologically, it might impact our coping. So really, as I said earlier, just thinking about what it is that you perceive as a threat. So unfortunately, we're not able to meet live this year, but I acknowledge that people in this virtual room today have medical and other challenges unique to each of you. And this year, whether you are undergoing treatment for a cancer diagnosis or post-treatment, or you're the supporter of someone with a cancer diagnosis, it certainly has been a year when we have been on a steep learning curve. I've felt when I've been speaking to the people that I work with that this feeling of a delay to life, that things have been on hold. People say to me, I wish I have been able to go to the Cancer Support Centre in person. I wish I'd been able to go to Gary Kelly and meet people face to face. I wish I'd have been able to sit down with my peer supporter for a cup of coffee. Really, really difficult. That isolation we felt, both from people and experiences. The other thing I wonder about is we've lost that opportunity, those little informal ways that we de-stress, the cup of coffee, the meeting somebody informally and just popping in for a chat. I find the car ride on the way home from work so useful to de-stress. And sometimes we've lost some of that. We've also had to make our own structure. We've really had to put in place a little structure for ourselves. As I said, we're habitual creatures, human beings, and it's hard work. I prefer to be told you need to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning and you need to stay there till 5. It gives me my structure to my day. And certainly we've been hit with a lot of extra demands. So I really want to acknowledge that for everyone in the audience today. So 2020 and 2021, the global pandemic has certainly been a huge challenge. And on top of that, a cyber attack. I mean, are they kidding? It's just been one thing after the other. But I really want to say to you that, yes, we've had an emphasis on self-care in the last year. Yes, it's a bit of a buzzword. But please, we didn't need to wait for a global pandemic or a global disaster to bring a emphasis to self-care. It's not something selfish. I'm going to quote a lovely lady that I had in a group with me in a Cancer Thriving and Surviving group. She really struggled to really let herself and give herself permission to self-care. So she came in the one day and she said, Vicky, I've changed the word selfish to self-full. And she said, it felt wrong to take time for myself. That felt selfish. But when I realized that I needed to top up my energy, I needed to fill up that little tank of energy that I have, that worked for me. So think about it as self-full, not selfish. I really want you to think about making this a part of your daily routine. And by practicing self-care and by me being here on the main stage today, we really normalize this for ourselves, but also for those around us. So self-care refers to activities undertaken with the intention of enhancing energy, restoring health, and reducing stress. And I've highlighted there, it's an active and proactive role that we take in managing our overall health and wellness. It gives us a framework for managing our stress, our life challenges, professional burnout, and compassion fatigue. And I like the word empowerment. It's an empowerment process. We're filling up a self-full attitude, which creates a balance and equilibrium in our personal, our social, and our work lives. And it's any activity that we engage in deliberately to take care of all of the aspects of ourselves. And just to make note that the WHO definition here includes spiritual health. And it's an area that psychology and well-being practitioners are certainly recognizing. So spirituality is not religion, though it may be. For some people, it is being in nature, it's prayer, it's meditation, it's stillness, whatever it is for you. Really important that we think about that in our well-being toolbox as well, and our self-care strategies. So I want you to just have a little look at this list. These are things, concerns and worries that we may need to look out for. So if you find yourself at the moment, or perhaps you found yourself previously, or in the future, these are little signposts and little warning signs we need to look out for. Things like changing in our eating habits, a loss of motivation, a sense of apathy, maybe an excessive guilt. If I'm finding myself very fatigued, Mick spoke and Eddie about fatigue being very much a part and parcel of post-treatment, but also our well-being and our mental and psychological well-being can impact our fatigue. I don't feel like myself anymore. I feel different. I might isolate myself. I might feel stressed. I might be irritable. I might be emotional. I might be all of those things in 10 minutes. I might be thinking irrationally. I might be using substances more than usual, etc., etc. This is just a nice little guide for you to have a look at, just to look out for warning signs. So why do we self-care? Well, obviously, some of the things are self-explanatory. We want to manage our stress and stressful situations. We want to reduce future mental health challenges. We want to increase our well-being. And then this lovely concept of resilience, that real ability to bounce back from things that are difficult. So thinking about taking that proactive stance, I'm encouraging you here today to do things ahead of when things get difficult. So interesting bit of research, and I like this bit of research because it was actually done after the SARS pandemic. And these researchers looked at potentially traumatic events. And they said that during our lifetime, we are all likely to be exposed to a potentially, so they don't say a traumatic event, it's potentially going to be traumatic for me. Maybe that's a cancer diagnosis, but maybe that's a family challenge, maybe it's something at work, maybe it's a natural disaster, etc., etc. And most of us are going to experience this, but people respond differently. So they had a look at the research longitudinally, so over time, and they had a little look at people, and they realized that there's potentially 4 groups of people. The first group, 5 to 10% of people, unfortunately, are going to have chronic or ongoing challenges after a traumatic event. There's a second group, between 10 and 25% of people have a delayed reaction. So they're the group of people who are turning around now and going, what was going on then? What was that all about? And trying to make sense of things. And there's a majority of people will have an initial drop in their psychological well-being, but after about a year, that'll return to stress functioning. And then there's this interesting group, this 10%, and these are the bunch who are resilient. And we wonder, why are they resilient? And really, I want to say to you, these people are more resilient because they have self-care built in to their functioning, to their management of difficult situations. So, to think about 2 great philosophers of our time, I want you to think more Tigger than Eeyore. So you really want to think, I want to have that bounce back from difficult situations. The stress first aid model I'm going to introduce to you now, and this is a model that was originally developed in the United States for the armed forces, and you can see that just in the language that they use there. And it promotes self-care and also peer support, and that's that bit Mick was talking about. We know that when we support others, that has benefits for ourselves as well. So it's a personal and also a peer support model. And it's evidence informed, and it helps us recover from stress and adversity. So perfect after the COVID pandemic, also perfect after recovery from a cancer diagnosis. So have a look there on the, it's a little traffic light system. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll notice the green area. This is when I'm optimally functioning, I'm well, I'm at my best, I'm well trained, I'm in control, I'm motivated, calm and steady, and I'm having fun. Sometimes I'm in the yellow zone, and I might be feeling a kind of a mild and transient distress, but that goes away. So when I drive home and I'm listening to Matt Cooper on my way home, by the time I get home, I'm feeling okay again. It can be a reaction to any kind of stressor, and it can make me feel irritable, down, unmotivated, just not having fun, and I might really notice those physical sensations. The orange area is where it's more severe and persistent, and this is when it goes on, and it leaves a mark behind it. This is when I'm at a higher risk of developing stress or a stress injury, as they call it in the stress first aid model. This is when I have things like a life threat, loss, a moral injury, which is just when something doesn't sit well with the way I believe things to be in the world. And then that just fatigue injury, that wear and tear. And that's when we need to really be careful in terms of our self-care. And then when I move into the red area, that's when I might meet the criteria for something like a mental health diagnosis. And this can be because of an unhealed stress injury from before, but it really impacts my everyday functioning. And that's when I might be experiencing things like post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, substance abuse. And these things can persist and worsen over time. And the point of this model is that we want to always be moving towards the green. So we identify some of those warning signs we spoke about and might say, well, gosh, I think I'm in the orange. I want to move towards yellow and ultimately towards green. So I have to say, I've probably spent a lot of time the last year and a half in the orange zone. I've camped out in yellow and seen very little of green. But all the time with my self-care strategies, I'm trying to move towards the green. And what the research in stress first aid tells us is that we need flexible self-care strategies. So these researchers, Levi Gigi, had a look. So during emotionally intense contexts, so think Leah Varadkar walking out to the podium March last year, everybody's emotions were really, really high. During those emotionally intense periods, I need to be distracting myself. So do you know that Netflix had over 200 million subscribers at the beginning of COVID? Why? We were all trying to distract ourselves. But as things have continued, and now that emotionally intense context has subsided, so another context, think about your initial diagnosis, emotionally intense, post-treatment period, emotionally less intense, we're just getting used to coping with things. At this stage, post-treatment or post-COVID, we need to be reappraising. We need to be making sense of what has happened. And if we're able to have flexible self-care, this allows us then to manage our stress levels, and it decreases the chances of me having a serious stress injury. So what strategies do I use just in the last few seconds of the presentation? It's tempting to try and think of learning new strategies. But what I want to say to you is use the things you already do. And then when things are going well, you can then start to use different strategies. Be flexible and integrate your self-care into the everyday. These slides are going to be available to you. This presentation is going to be recorded. So come back, have a look at some of these ideas. These are things that I've learned from people that I work with. Go into nature, pray, don't eat at your desk, go outside and sit outside, hydrate yourself, make sure you have regular breaks, go to the beach and put your fingers and toes into the sand and feel what it feels like. Maybe engage spiritually with somebody, write a list, hug somebody, whatever it is, thinking about these things, but think about integrating these in good times. Don't wait until things are stressful to self-care. So that's me, folks. A snapshot of self-care. As I say, I'm presenting a workshop straight after this, and that workshop will be presented again tomorrow, where I'll take this initial little bit of research and information, and I'll be moving that into the realm where things are a little bit more applicable and practical. So I thank you very much for your attention and your patience, and I'll hand you back to the lovely Eddie.
Well, Vicky, that was a very enthusiastic, very engaging presentation. I love the whole notion of the fight and flight and freeze. And I always say the evolutionary secret was to hang around with people that were slower than you, because that way they got there first.
That's a really good strategy, Eddie.
One of the things you've left us with a hanging question now. How did a South African psychologist end up being a Mayo footballer follower? Can you explain that to us?
Oh, Eddie, I was very lucky back in 2007 to get a job in Castlebar in Mayo in a wonderful organisation called Western Care. And as I arrived in Castlebar, Eddie, the first thing they told me was, you are now a Mayo football supporter. And I've wondered ever since, if I'd only got the job in Dublin, I would have been on a winning streak for the last while. But I'm an avid a Mayo football supporter.
Well, that is just incredible. And it's lovely to hear that story. Listen, we got our results from our poll, and it's not surprising when we looked at the whole area of how stress is impacted on you. It almost broke down to an even 90% of people had levels of stress, medium, high, or very high, and 10% was minimal. So that's over 90% of our audience had levels of stress between medium, high, and very high. So incredibly, it shows you the impact in this COVID pandemic on everybody, and the importance of the self-care message that has been spoken to by Vicky. And I encourage you to have a look at our workshops, our breakout sessions, and get over there. There's one today, one tomorrow, and we really encourage you. Some incredible strategies around self-care in our sessions. Thank you very much. I'm joined now by Una Fannin, grassroots advocacy coordinator for the Irish Cancer Society. You're very welcome, Una. Important work you're doing, incredible work. Maybe you just tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, thanks a million, Eddie. So really the work of the advocacy team at the Irish Cancer Society is to keep cancer on the government's agenda and to lobby on behalf of cancer patients and their loved ones. And we do this by engaging with the government, with TDs, with the HSE and the Department of Health and many others to ensure that cancer patients' voices are really heard at all levels of government. And so one of the things that,
okay. I think we talked about the forgotten C. I think that's something you raised. I'd love to hear about that, and I'm sure our viewers would love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose over the past 15 months, we've mostly been advocating for cancer patients and to ensure that cancer does not become the forgotten C during the COVID pandemic. So that has really been our priority over the past 15 months. We have had some good wins in that we've been able to ensure that cancer patients were moved up the vaccination schedule. Recently, we lobbied the Minister for Health to ask that cancer patients who were travelling for treatment would not be subjected to mandatory hotel quarantine. So these are the types of issues that we've been campaigning for over the past year or so.
Incredibly important. Tell us a bit a role about the volunteer coordinator. I'd love to hear something about that.
Yeah, so there are ways that our attendees today can learn about how to get involved with us. We run an advocacy volunteer program whereby we have advocacy champions in each of the 39 constituencies across Ireland. And they work with us to highlight the challenges that cancer patients face to their local politicians. We currently have a number of advocates who have been trained by us and are working in this work to support our advocacy campaigns. And we still have a number of constituencies left to fill. So people can learn more about that by visiting cancer.ie/advocate.
And you're one of our exhibitors today, incredibly important, all our exhibitors. And what can we expect from your virtual booth that's going to be opened, where you're going to be present between 1:30 and 2 o'clock? All our exhibitors will be there between that time, and you can visit that. Just click on the left-hand side of your screen. You can go in anytime you want, but our live exhibition is there at between 1:30 and 2 o'clock. But what can we expect in your booth there, Una?
So in our advocacy booth, you can learn more about the advocacy work that we've been doing and some of our recent wins. Also, we know from our own research on the real cost of cancer that cancer patients can face a significant loss of income as well as a huge increase in their medical costs after a diagnosis. So it's really important that cancer patients are aware of the government supports, benefits and entitlements that they may be entitled to. So we have an online benefits and entitlements hub, and there's more information about that also in our booth. And we've recently set up a free legal advice clinic for patients who are maybe having trouble accessing social welfare benefits. And there's also information about that in the booth. And finally, you can learn about how to get involved with us in our advocacy work, either by volunteering with us as an advocacy champion or by getting involved as an online advocate in our advocacy network.
So I would only encourage people, because financial implications of cancer is often a very hidden thing, isn't it, Una?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I suppose when people are going through the trauma and the shock, I suppose, of a cancer diagnosis, we don't often talk about the very real practical financial implications that come along with the diagnosis. So on the advocacy team, you know, a lot of our work is around highlighting the issues around financial challenges for patients and trying to seek to resolve some of those issues.
So I think there's going to be really practical support. Come and visit here today, 1:30 to 2 o'clock. You can visit the virtual. Have you any information on other exhibitors that are there today?
Yes, so we have a number of exhibitors that will be going live from 1:30 to 2 p.m, including myself in the advocacy booth, but also look out for Purple House, ARC Cancer Support, and the Gary Kelly Support Centre. They'll all be live at 1:30 today and tomorrow. Our nurses, our cancer nurses on the Irish Cancer Support Line will also be in their booth from 1:30 to 2 p.m. and also from 9:30 to 10:30 tomorrow morning. So do drop them a line in the chat function and they will get back to you. And finally, I think booths.
Thanks a lot, Una. Just to remind everybody, on your left-hand side, exhibitors are open all the time, but they're present between 1:30 and 2 o'clock. Join them today. Don't haste. Get in there and join and have great conversations.
Thanks a million, Eddie. That's great.
Well, that's all from us at the main stage now. We'd like to see you back at 3 o'clock. We've two incredible speakers. So come back at 3 o'clock. We've Dr. Rob O'Connor, Director of Research at the Irish Cancer Society, who will be looking and sharing with us information about COVID and the cancer community. And Dr. Yaruska Naidu, Medical Consultant Oncologist in Beaumont Hospital, will be taking us all up to speed in the whole area of immunotherapy, advances in immunotherapy for cancer. So two incredible speakers at 3 o'clock. Come right back. And don't forget, we have an incredible workshop program. Absolutely incredible. 7 different workshops commencing at 11:30, 12:30 and 2 o'clock. So join us here today on those workshops. There's exercise and movement, there's mindfulness, there's getting back to work, there's eating well, there's benefits. There's 7 different workshops. Check it out. Join in on those workshops. Make this a big experience that you can get in and get the best out of this conference. That's what we want for you, and I'm sure you want as well. Take care. Thank you very much.